manzarati. Anyways, so today's video, spiritual discussion. As much as I love the light, I would like it to be in my face. There we go. Okay. So today's spiritual topic is discussing what is sainthood. Oh, Lord. Yes. Lead me, guide me along the way. For if you lead me, I cannot stray. Lord, let me walk each day with thee. Lead me, O Lord, lead me. Rama, Rama, Rama. Shanti, love, love. So sainthood, what does it mean to be sainted? If we talk about Christ, Christ is a term that has to do with being anointed. So there's different levels of consciousness in a way that relate to infinity, as I discussed yesterday, befriending infinity. Christ is one of those. Melchizedek. There's probably a lot of other ones. It's like kind of like a hierarchy of awareness or something like that. Like you've reached milestone 3. Yeah. So I guess kind of understanding let's put it this way. The reason that we have hierarchies is so that people on their journey can understand one step and then after that step the next one. So the idea of it is from a soul's perspective. As your soul ages, you begin to understand more, and in that understanding you begin to become more wise, and in that wisdom you begin to become more aware, and in that awareness you begin to become more attuned, and in that attunement you begin to realize what's real. So eventually you become kind of like Maharaji, I guess, or whatever, where you feel that only what's real. So for example, being love itself. It doesn't mean that, other things don't matter, but it means that why would those other things matter so much is the question. So let's see. So sainthood. So if we go back in time a little bit here, we can talk about Saint Francis. Saint Francis was a man before he was sainted. I'm assuming his name was Francis. And he lived in Italy, I believe. Assisi, that's right. My mom's here and she's helping me talk. I love my mom. She's great. So Saint Francis was, I think he was in war. Me and my mom watched a movie, year or two ago about Saint Francis, and it was like a biography of his life, and he was in a war in Italy, and he was didn't want to kill anyone. I can understand that for sure. I mean, why would be the question. Why are you needing to kill someone? And most likely, the vast majority of the time, the reason is pretty wrong. So so he was in this war, and then he heard God's voice, you know, what Adyashanti likes to call the still small voice, right? So that's pretty awesome in the midst of a war to be able to hear God's voice. And then he actually listened to the voice. He didn't brush us away and say, you know, it's not real, it's just nothing. He didn't do that. He listened to it and he abided in it. So that being God's guidance, being eternal love. So the first step in sainthood is acknowledging the infinite. The next step in sainthood is actually listening to that guidance. You could call it the heart, you could call it perfection, you could call it enlightened consciousness, you can call it the still small voice, you can call it God, you can call it whatever you want to, you can call it Reiki, even So to me, that's the process of sainthood. Nothing qualifies me to talk about this. You could turn this video off at any time. I don't mind at all. But I am going to talk about it because it's fun. And I'm pretty cool, actually. And I know what I'm talking about. So anyways, so the process, I feel, for very, very, very generalized idea of the evolution of the soul. It depends how deep down you want to go, but the idea of it is that we have minerals, then we have plant life, then we have animals, then we have humans, and the soul apparently is all of that. So the idea of it is that as you make choices, you realize the gravity of the choices, and then also the non-material, very ephemeral nature also of the choices. So for example, yes, the choices are there and we're not going to change them. Also, does it matter? So usually that's the soul's perspective. It's like, you know, this is forever, might not matter at all. I feel like that's kind of the lighthearted nature of the soul. Now, for the reason that we struggle with coming into alignment fully with the soul is because the soul is not based in rules of this world. The soul does not care about government laws. The soul does not say, you know, oh, but you know, but I'll get in trouble if I go in there and not go in there, and right? So it's a little bit wild. It's a little bit different. Very weird and strange. But if we are to actually be happy, then I feel that we need to actually honor our souls. So, yes. And so let's see. I'm going to go back and say the thing with St. Francis. So he listened to the voice. So that's the first step. So that's the first choice that you're going to have to make, right? So for example, if you think of the soul as a tree and we have the roots and then you go and then the trunk is there. And then as you get to a certain age, actually, you branch, you have choices and there's branches and there's different places and directions you can go. But, you know, it depends how big of a picture you want. So, and then for me, I feel what I like Zen is because it takes away the suffering a lot of the time. Because if you have too much importance, like George Carlin could have been a saint. He was an atheist, but who cares? And he said we meaning America in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, and probably up to the 90s, are too self-important. So what he meant by that is it's like when a parent scolds a teenager, not a child, and they scold a teenager, and the teenager is 18, and they say, I know that you like to drive the car and that you want to drive it fast, but if you do that, you're most likely going to injure yourself or someone else, and we can't be having that happen. So what does he mean by too self-important? What happens when you focus too much on just a you? Now, there's a grace point that happens where God will say, you are not just you, right? So that's the idea of oneness. So what happens is during the soul's journey towards sainthood, I don't know if I want to say inevitably. What I should have done is I should have just looked up sainthood. Here, let's do that. Let's look up sainthood on Google here. Sainthood definition. The status of well, that's not going to help. The status of a saint. What are the requirements for sainthood? 2 verifiable postmortem miracles. Evidence of having led an exemplary life of goodness and virtue worthy of imitation, having died a heroic death or martyrdom, or having undergone a major conversion of heart where a previous immoral life is abandoned and replaced by one of outstanding holiness. Okay. We are now going to talk about Milarepa. So Milarepa was a Buddhist. He ended up becoming a saint. So what he did is he was a murderer. And it's a little bit strange because I think that his soul already had siddhis, which is known as powers, that you can use through the chakras to actually change physical reality. And so I think what he did is he was really, really upset about stuff. Obviously, he was murdering people, and there's something that was going on that needed acceptance. And his teacher was Karmapa. And so basically the reason we're talking about him is because he was a murderer, and then he became a saint. So once again, there's a conversion point that happens that is not through our will. Okay? So for example, someone can meditate and they can pray and they could constantly be seeking out the truth. Now, if that does not qualify them for anything even special in particular. So for example, as Bashar says, when we are doing something, we should be doing it for its own sake. He doesn't say it in that way. I say it in that way, but I interpret his teachings and his energy it means that. So it means what we are doing, instead of projecting it into some end result, keeping it energetically present is what that means. So for example, later on today, if I go up to the attic here and in my home and I play music and I play the drums, yes, I can record it, and yes, maybe down the road someone will listen to it and they'll enjoy it. Maybe they'll throw me a few bucks. Lovely. But me recording that in the moment is actually an enjoyable experience. And strangely enough, the reason I would want to record it is actually more for myself. I actually really, really, really enjoy my own creation. So the idea of sainthood holiness. It revolves around holiness. Now, we have another term to define, but the idea of it is that how would you tell a saint in a crowd? Would you be able to say that person is a saint? I feel that through my attunement to all, I feel that, God would probably, if he or she wanted me to know that that person was a saint, that they could tell me, um, I don't know. The other thing about it is that saints aren't necessarily going to be the most obvious to us. When I visited the monasteries and the convents with the monks and the nuns, they, very obscure beings, but I feel that they are close to really surrendering into that vast heart space of God, which I would say is basically sainthood. That's what it is. So when you let go of your requests of God and you allow whatever this is to be, then you will find actually you'll find that there isn't even anything that you have to do. And then that's essentially the peace that what Jesus talked about, the peace of Christ. So to be able to be free from a lot of the bondages of the mundanity of society at large, right? Basically is what seeking sainthood offers you. So I feel that the nice thing about the saints is when people, they grow towards God, to the infinite, they realize that the pathways there are just as necessary and just as beautiful, but they do not need to be the same for everyone, right? So strangely, very, very controversial topic, but I highly recommend that you read my book, My Own Religion, the Power of Love. It's available if you comment or you go to my email at jvertino@buffalo.edu, JVERTINO @buffalo.edu. I can give you a free copy, or if you feel like donating, that would be lovely. I haven't finished the references yet. I have to finish the references. But in the book, the point of it is that the complementary nature of all of the major world religions. So, for example, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, the flying spaghetti monster, all of it is part of existence as it is. So, for example, on a soul level, in a past life, if I was born in India, that means I was most likely acclimatized, to that culture, and I was doing the yoga, and I was saying the prayers in Sanskrit, and doing the puja, and lighting the incense, and going to the Ganges, or whatever you want to call it. That isn't particularly, that's not going to be what the same practices that we're doing if I was in this life. I'm born Christian, and I mostly go to church, and do whatever they think is important, right? So for me, understanding the movement of the soul from one perspective of religion to another. But what is the continuity? That's the focus point. If you really want a hint, the continuity is basically the snake consciousness of reality, right? So as the soul incarnates and moves through one perspective into another perspective, right, this movement that's going on is kind of like the dance of eternity, and it's kind of doing what it does, right? So all these different lives and incarnations that we have. Okay, now back to the point of the video. What is sainthood? The reason we're talking about the soul is because the soul eventually, through its what it does, becomes that kind of golden light of sainthood, eternity, God's heart, Christ consciousness stuff. So the idea of being a saint is that in order for you to be a saint, it isn't about being in control or being in power. The saint actually should be in control and actually should be in power. The reason for it, paradoxically, as I put in my book, was because they have given up their attachment to control and to power. You can have self-control. You can have control of your mind space, in a way. And then you can teach people that. So, for example, if I was being like a Zen master and I was teaching people healthy mind control, being here, focusing, feeling the hara, and then allowing Zen, and then realizing that there isn't as much worry necessary, basically would be my teaching. Now, and then letting that and then the cool part about it is when with Zen is you can even see through the label of saints, meaning that when someone's a saint, they have sometimes they'll have an idea of I'm a saint. But when you're in the space of pure consciousness, there doesn't need to be anything going on. Not at all. Right? And then it isn't you. And even then, if you take it a step further, it isn't you and then them. Right? So to me, that's kind of Maharaji. I feel that that's the energy of Maharaji. There's one time Maharaji kind of graced me with a oneness experience. Oh Lord. And where was I? I think it was at like a restaurant or something. And I came out of the bathroom or something with people, and I like sat down, and something happened where I literally some way just understood that this person and that person were the same person. That was cool. Yeah. So the reason that felt ecstatic is because that's such a relief. Right? Such a relief. Now, the healing aspect of it is it's also kind of the epitome of vulnerability, but to me, it feels right. Just does, So So for me, let's see. So we're at 25 minutes. So we talked about a lot of stuff. We talked about St. Francis, talked about Christ consciousness, we talked about Melchizedek consciousness. We talked about this. We talked about the soul, a lot about that. We talked about Maharaji, understanding oneness. My question is, what is it that you want from life? So, for example, if we were all, say we were done, right? Say we were enlightened AF, and we were done. And you didn't have to do anything. You didn't have to be a saint anymore, right? You didn't have to try to achieve perfection. Now, so what is actually going on? What is something that you want to do? And to me, this is the reason kindness is important. Kindness is important. So the reason kindness is important is because the journey up to enlightenment, and then, the journey after enlightenment, is based in what I would say would you rather live on a planet full of assholes who are all enlightened, or live on a planet where people are kind first? I'll take number 2 on that one. But sometimes let yourself not care. So kind of a number 3, kind of a combo. So the idea of it is that kindness is important. Sometimes kindness has to turn its finger around and be kind to you. Now, what does that mean? That might mean completely letting go of all of the ideas that you think are important. And whatever happens to be the case, and really letting yourself be just as you are, just the way you are. And God's up there like, oh, you're the perfect, I love you. You're so good, Anyways, so I don't know. And a lot of it happens to do with a receptivity rather than a trying to attain a goal. So, for example, the idea of this is that in Tai Chi, when we do our breathing, we breathe in. So the idea of it depends how you want to see it. But when you breathe in, you're being receptive. When you breathe out, you're being masculine or whatever. So anyways, I pray that you can accept yourself fully. That's my prayer. I don't want to make the video too long. I'm available for spiritual consultation, Reiki healings, and if you're interested in my work, I have a book and I have music, donation based. I also have a GoFundMe page. You just because you just feel better, like, send me however much money you feel. That's something that you want to do. I'd most likely use it to feed myself and to travel, just so you know. Anyways, Om Nami Renge Kyo. Om Mani Padme Hum. I love you. Have a good day. Banzai. Sayonara.